Today's story is going to be so astonishing and unique because in this robbery, neither a bank was looted nor any house. Instead, a man stole $200,000 from a flying plane and then disappeared from that plane in midair. Although the FBI worked on this case for many years to catch this thief, and many people also came forward whose appearance closely resembled that thief, even then he was never caught by the FBI. Finally, the FBI had to close this case after 45 years. This robbery is still a mystery today because people still refuse to believe that a man can vanish into thin air and never get caught by the police. So, who was that thief who carried out this amazing robbery, and what happened afterward that shook the entire FBI? The story begins on November 24, 1971. It was the day when all of America was celebrating Thanksgiving. On this very day, a man named D.B. Cooper reached Portland Airport and bought a plane ticket of Northwest Airlines for $20. This plane was going to fly between Portland and Seattle. That was an era when, to buy a ticket on a domestic flight, there was no need for any ID card, and neither the luggage passengers carried was checked. This clearly meant that passengers could take any kind of belongings with them. D.B. Cooper was about 40 years old. He was wearing a black suit with a tie. Over this suit, he wore a brown coat and brown shoes as well. He was holding a suitcase and a paper bag in his hand, and after entering the plane, he went straight to his seat, which was towards the back. After sitting in his seat, D.B. Cooper lit a cigarette and ordered his favorite drink, bourbon. Around 3 p.m., the plane had taken off, and from here began that astonishing robbery of D.B. Cooper that made him the most mysterious thief in history. D.B. Cooper rang the call bell near him, after which an air hostess approached him. D.B. Cooper handed her a piece of paper. At first, the air hostess thought that D.B. Cooper was flirting with her, and smiling, she put that piece of paper into her coat pocket without reading it. When D.B. Cooper saw this, he told the air hostess to read that note in front of him. As soon as she took out the note and started reading it, her eyes widened in shock. The note said that he had a bomb, and he wanted her to quietly sit next to him so that he could show her the bomb and tell her his demands. Reading this note, the air hostess nervously sat down on the seat next to D.B. Cooper. After that, D.B. Cooper opened his briefcase, in which a bomb was kept. He told the air hostess to start writing down all his demands on a piece of paper and take it to the plane's captain. D.B. Cooper's first demand was that by 5 p.m., he should get a bag filled with $200,000. His second demand was that a truck filled with airplane fuel should be kept ready at the airport. And in his third demand, he asked for 4 parachutes. But the plane's captain could not understand why D.B. Cooper, along with money, was demanding a fuel truck and parachutes. The reason behind his second demand was that when the plane would land at the airport, fuel would be filled from that truck so that the plane could take off again. And in his third demand, he asked for parachutes because he planned to wear a parachute and jump from the plane. Along with the parachutes, he also put a condition, that the FBI should not tamper with any of them so that after jumping from the plane, he wouldn't face any problems. After reading all these demands, the plane's captain informed the airline's company. The air hostess went back to D.B. Cooper, where she saw that he was sitting calmly, smoking his cigarette, and drinking his bourbon. Seeing him, it seemed that he was very confident and not scared of anything. The air hostess told D.B. Cooper that all his demands had been conveyed to the airline's company and the American authorities, and this plane would not land until all his demands were fulfilled. As the plane approached Seattle Airport, the pilot slowed its speed and began flying it above the airport. Meanwhile, the FBI was also preparing to fulfill all of D.B. Cooper's demands. The passengers sitting in the plane had no idea that it had been hijacked. At that time, the plane's captain told those passengers a lie, that due to some problem at the airport, the plane would land late. The reason behind this lie was so that the passengers inside the plane would not panic. This plane kept flying over that airport for almost 3 hours until, after fulfilling all the demands, the airport authorities gave the captain the signal to land. The plane was landed at the most isolated part of the airport, far from the entrance, and its gate was kept closed so that neither the FBI nor the police could enter from outside. Shortly after landing, all of Cooper's demands were fulfilled. A bag filled with $200,000 and 4 parachutes were placed outside the plane, and fuel was also refilled in it. After his demands were met, Cooper released all the passengers. He sent out 2 air hostesses and had the bag and parachutes brought inside the plane. Now Cooper told the flight's captain to fly the plane straight to Mexico. But the American authorities had deployed 2 jet planes to follow this flight. These jet pilots were given special instructions to keep their jets a little away so that Cooper would not notice them. Also, due to rain, Cooper could not see these jets. Cooper was very clever, and that's why he knew very well that American authorities would definitely chase him with jet planes. So, around 8 p.m., he told all the air hostesses to go into the cockpit with the pilot, after which he locked the cockpit from the outside. Shortly afterward, an alarm went off in the cockpit, informing the pilot that the back door of the plane had been opened. This was a Boeing 727 plane, which had a stairway door at the back that any passenger could open while the plane was in flight. As soon as the pilot realized that the plane's door had been opened and the pressure was dropping, he immediately understood that Cooper had jumped from the plane. It was either the good luck of the plane crew or just a coincidence that while Cooper was locking all the crew members inside the cockpit, one air hostess had gone into the washroom. She didn't come out until Cooper had jumped from the plane. As soon as Cooper jumped, that air hostess came out of the washroom and opened the cockpit door. Coming out of the cockpit, the plane's captain and the air hostess ran toward the back gate of the plane, where they found out that D.B. Cooper had disappeared from the plane, and the suitcase containing the bomb was also gone. However, Cooper had left behind 2 parachutes on the plane. The place where Cooper jumped was a forest between Seattle and Reno. What happened after that became a topic of debate for the next 50 years because Cooper was never found again, neither alive nor dead. Even the 2 jets that were following this plane could not see where Cooper went. As soon as this plane landed at the airport, the FBI started investigating it thoroughly. They searched every corner of the plane so that they could reach D.B. Cooper in any way. After several hours of investigation, the only evidence the FBI found was the black tie that D.B. Cooper had been wearing. Although through this tie the FBI could have extracted Cooper's DNA and tracked him, at that time DNA technology was not available. So, they kept that tie aside, and it only came in handy many years later. The FBI first began searching for Cooper in the forest because they believed that after jumping from such a height, Cooper could not have survived. But Cooper had disappeared completely. Now the FBI, with the help of those air hostesses, started making a sketch of D.B. Cooper. The FBI believed that these sketches would be very accurate, and based on them, they could catch Cooper, as the air hostesses had spent hours with him. The air hostesses described Cooper's appearance to the sketch artist and also mentioned that Cooper was a man of 6 feet 1 inch, about 40 years old, and weighed approximately 80 kilograms. At first, the FBI thought that Cooper might have an accomplice who helped him in this robbery. But when the pilot told them that Cooper was alone on the plane when they were flying again toward Mexico, their theory was proved wrong. The FBI also played a trick to catch Cooper. They recorded the serial numbers of all the notes in that bag. All those notes were $20 bills, which clearly meant that as soon as Cooper spent this money, he would be caught. 10 years after this robbery, in 1980, a boy was sitting on the riverbank, playing with sand. He kept putting his hand inside the sand repeatedly, and suddenly he found a very old, decayed $20 bill. Seeing this, he was shocked and started digging that sand with a stone. Then, his hands touched 3 bundles of $20 bills, which because of fungus and soil, they were completely ruined. The value of the notes found in these 3 bundles was $55,000, and the FBI began matching the notes with those serial numbers. The most astonishing thing was that even after 10 years of the robbery, the serial numbers matched, and the first clue related to this case came into the hands of the FBI. The boy from whom the notes were recovered was camping with his father in an area called Tina Bar, and this fact put the FBI in a great dilemma because different people were coming up with different theories. Some said that Cooper must have buried these bundles of notes there himself, while others said that these bundles had floated down the river and reached there. A year after this plane robbery, that is, in 1972, some evidence and several people came into the hands of the FBI on whom they had suspicion, but all this evidence only misled the FBI. The biggest reason for this was that the news of this plane robbery had spread like wildfire across America, and most people, just to become famous, were sending messages to the FBI claiming that they themselves were D.B. Cooper or knew him. In the first 5 years of the investigation of this plane robbery, the suspects list reached 800, but as time moved forward, the investigation stopped at 24 people. Although a case of plane hijacking had been filed against Cooper, according to American law, statute of limitations, this charge was dropped after 5 years, and so, after 5 years, a panel of judges put a charge of blackmailing on Cooper, which, according to American law, could not be removed with time. The FBI and American authorities were adopting every legal and illegal method to catch Cooper, but he never came into their hands, and this became a hijacking case in the history of the FBI that could never be solved. The FBI now started digging into those suspects whose appearance matched D.B. Cooper to a great extent, and the first person who came up was named Richard Floyd McCoy. Not only did Richard's face resemble D.B. Cooper's, but there were also many things because of which the FBI's suspicion was strongest on Richard. Just 4 months after this plane robbery, on April 7, 1972, Richard also hijacked a plane. The most shocking thing was that Richard also chose a Boeing 727 for the hijacking, the same plane model in which Cooper carried out his robbery. Along with that, Richard, just like Cooper, gave a note to the air hostess, but the amount demanded in it was much less than Cooper's. In this note, Richard demanded $55,000 and 4 parachutes, and with the help of these parachutes, he jumped from the plane. The method Richard used for this plane robbery was exactly the same as Cooper's, but during all this, Richard made one mistake: he left the note he had given to the air hostess on that plane. Because of the fingerprints found on this note, Richard was caught. Although the method used in both plane robberies was exactly the same, the investigation revealed that Richard merely wanted to become famous by copying Cooper, and based on the evidence found on the plane, the FBI arrested Richard in just 2 days. After the arrest, the court sentenced Richard to 44 years in prison. Many people said that he was D.B. Cooper himself who committed the robbery in exactly the same way, but when the FBI showed Richard's photo to the air hostesses who had spoken with Cooper, they flatly denied that he was D.B. Cooper. There was one more piece of evidence on the basis of which it was confirmed that Richard was not D.B. Cooper, and that was the fact that on the day D.B. Cooper carried out the plane robbery, Richard was celebrating Thanksgiving with his family in Utah. Now the FBI moved to their second suspect, whose name was Duane Weber. He was the man who, 25 years after this plane robbery, that is, in 1995, confessed on his deathbed that he was D.B. Cooper. Duane's wife told the FBI that on his deathbed Duane called her close and said to her that he was D.B. Cooper. Hearing this, Duane's wife remembered those things which he often used to say, proving that at the time of death he was speaking the truth. Duane often said in his sleep that he had left some evidence on the plane, and he also had a lot of pain in his knee, which, according to Duane, had happened when he jumped from a height. The most astonishing revelation made by Duane's wife was that Duane had written the name D.B. Cooper on some of the books in his library, and he had once taken her to Tina Bar as well, the same area from where the bundles of notes covered with fungus and soil were recovered from under the sand. From Duane's possession, an old plane ticket of the same airline was also recovered, the airline whose plane D.B. Cooper had used for this robbery. But because the ticket was very old, all the date and time had been erased from it. Duane had once been sentenced to 6 years for theft and fraud, and since his face also resembled D.B. Cooper's to a great extent, it was possible that he was D.B. Cooper. And that was why the FBI searched all files related to Duane, but they found nothing. The third suspect who was in the FBI's eyes was Kenneth Christiansen. Kenneth had a brother named Lyle Christiansen, and when Lyle saw a documentary about D.B. Cooper in 2003, he became convinced that his brother Kenneth was D.B. Cooper, who had already died. Lyle's brother Kenneth had died back in 1994, and before dying, he wanted to tell him some secret but could not. After watching the D.B. Cooper documentary, Lyle, based on some facts, reached this theory that his brother was Cooper. The first fact was that Kenneth worked for Northwest Airlines, the same airline where this plane robbery had happened, and because of this, he knew about the plane's schedule and its internal details. Kenneth also smoked cigarettes like D.B. Cooper, and bourbon was his favorite drink, just like Cooper's. A big reason for suspecting Kenneth was that only a few weeks after this plane robbery, he bought a very expensive and luxurious house. But because Kenneth had also died, and the FBI could not interrogate him, Kenneth also went out of their suspect list. The fourth and last suspect on the FBI's list was Robert Rackstraw. He was still alive, and he was an ex-soldier who had taken part in the Vietnam War and had been a helicopter pilot. Robert had received training in the Army for making bombs and using parachutes. The biggest reason for suspecting Robert was that just a few days before this plane robbery, he had been discharged from the Army, and he had a solid reason to take revenge on American authorities. Along with this, he was unemployed, due to which he carried out this plane robbery. When a press reporter asked him whether he was D.B. Cooper, he replied that maybe, one could not say. In a documentary, Robert even said that he could close this case, but when the FBI realized that he was just misleading them to get attention, and along with that, they did not find any evidence against him, they closed his file and the investigation of this case forever in 2016. Although the suspects list was quite long, only these 4 suspects were thoroughly investigated because their appearances resembled D.B. Cooper's sketch. During the investigation, an FBI high-ranking officer named Larry Carr reached a theory. This officer's theory was that after jumping from the plane, D.B. Cooper would not have survived because he had used the worst parachute among those 4 parachutes to jump from the plane. Officer Larry Carr also believed that if D.B. Cooper had been a professional thief, he would not have jumped from the plane in such bad weather. That was why he was fully convinced of his theory that Cooper did not survive after jumping from the plane. On the other hand, there were also reasons not to believe this theory, the first of which was that the FBI neither ever found D.B. Cooper's body nor any evidence against him, and the second biggest reason was those bundles of notes that were found buried under the sand. Now the question arises as to why the FBI only found 3 bundles of notes, why they were never spent, and why they were never recovered in full. The answer is that perhaps the briefcase full of notes had fallen straight into the river, and only 3 bundles came out of it and, floating in the water, got buried in the sand on the riverbank. Since Cooper had used the worst parachute, it was difficult to control it, and as soon as he opened that parachute, he would not have been able to control it, and the wind must have carried him straight into the river, where he drowned, and in the river's current, his body and his money were all washed away. As you may remember, the FBI had preserved Cooper's tie found from the plane so that after the arrival of DNA technology, they could test it. 10 years after this plane robbery, when they tested the DNA on this tie, they found chemicals on it that were used only in shipbuilding factories. From this, it could be inferred that Cooper worked in a shipbuilding factory. But since this whole case was based only on assumptions and theories, after interrogating about 25 people, the FBI, 45 years after this robbery, finally closed this investigation forever in 2016, and D.B. Cooper's robbery became recorded in the pages of history as an unsolved robbery. How did you like this story? Write in the comments section and let us know. Like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.